All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marjorie Vale, and I'm co-director of awareness for Push for Empowered Pregnancy. Tonight, I'm so excited to be talking to the Sad Dads Club. Excited. Tonight we have founders, two of the three founders, Rob Ryder and Chris Piasecki. Did I say that right?
Perfect. Nailed it.
Perfect. Awesome. So let me tell you why I'm excited. I think when we talk about stillbirth awareness, we always hear the mother's perspective, right? And sometimes the fathers are kind of like in the shadows. We don't hear too many men speaking about their experiences and what it's like to be a co-part, like co-parent or of loss. And so when I found out, or when we found out that you both, the three of you, created this safe space for men, we were really, really excited. So we look forward to hearing all that we can tonight about Sad Dads Club. So I wanted to start off with asking what where did it all start? We know it started with stillbirth, but I'll ask Rob, what was your story? What happened, and how did it lead to Sad Dads Club?
Thank you so much for having us on here and giving us some space to talk about the Community Sad Dads Club. And my story specifically started in 2017 when my wife and I found out that we were pregnant with our first child that ended up being a daughter. And at 38 weeks, we went in for what was supposed to just be a typical, normal, routine checkup, and there was no heartbeat.
Mm,
Um, Hours later, that was in the we were the first appointment of the day, and my wife gave birth to our daughter Lila at 10:49 p.m. that evening. And me personally, I had a friend, the third founder who is not here tonight, Jay Tanzi, who 11 months earlier in 2017 had also endured a stillbirth with their second child, also a daughter, Bella. So I immediately had somebody that I could go to and talk to from a
mm,
father's perspective and have a safe space to sort of just confide in him with these unique complexities that I was dealing with and these struggles that I was having as a father and as a partner, and feeling as though it was a good place to go, that I wouldn't necessarily rock the boat and upset my wife. If she was on a good path, I could go someplace and have a dedicated safe space to talk about all of the things I was experiencing, which was anger, sadness, fear, um, imposter syndrome of being a father. Was I a father or wasn't I? I
mm.
didn't feel like I was one. But
Right.
before I go on too long, I'll hand it over to Chris.
Chris, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so my wife and I's journey started in 2018. We lost Isabel 2 days before my birthday.
Mm,
And, I just immediately, one of the big regrets I still live with is I wasn't in the room when my wife found out, which
mm,
has unique challenges to it. Um, So I remember the first thing I said to the technician and the doctor when I was in there is, "What do we do now?"
mm,
Um, I had never thought about a world where, they tell you you have to go deliver, and specifically my wife had to go deliver our now deceased daughter. And, that night was, every person's nightmare,
mhm,
sitting in a hospital bed, knowing what the outcome's going to be, but still in a weird way holding on to hope, holding on to maybe thinking they might be wrong,
right.
knowing they're probably not, but you hold on to that hope. And when we got out, I didn't know where to turn. But my wife went to the same college as Rob and Jay, and so did my sister-in-law. And my sister-in-law Christine reached out to Jay, who reached out to me, and luckily I was able to connect with Rob and Jay, and they embraced me with open arms. And the one thing I can say is that it was the first time I felt like I didn't have to explain my feelings. Um,
Mm,
Everyone means well, but there's just something different about talking to somebody who's lived it. Um, yeah, so Isabel passed away July 21st, 2018, and that was the beginning of our journey.
beautiful names. Bella and Isabella, right? Is that?
Isabel, Lila, and Bella was Jay's daughter.
Isabel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Isabel. Isabel and your daughter's name was Chris?
My daughter's name was Lila. His was Isabel.
Oh,
Yep.
Lila and Isabel. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I just want to get it
Oh no,
correct.
you're good. Yep.
Okay.
If you're ever wondering, just look at his neck.
I saw that before. Sorry.
That's
Thank
okay.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. So thank you for sharing. Like I said, we don't really get to hear a father's perspective. For me personally, you know, we experienced our loss. I experienced my loss it's gonna be 20 years ago this year.
Mm.
In 2004. We would have had a son. He would have been 20 in September. And I remember there was a lack of resources and a lack of space for us, to go to, like, in terms of like um, therapy, support groups, and things like that. So that was 20 years ago. So what was your experience after your loss? Like, what did the hospitals do for you in terms of like telling you, okay, this is where you can go and this is where you can get help? Did that happen for you, or was that non-existent?
I think the hospital did a great job, especially while we were in the hospital. That my family and I received exceptional care. It was really something that I reflect on fondly, and that I'm still in awe of what the care team, the nurses and doctors, were able to do for us. The way they acknowledged our daughter by name, the way that they gave our family exactly what we needed, even when we didn't know how to articulate what we needed. They just had this sixth sense that was pretty remarkable. In terms of resources and outlets to seek support afterwards, there just isn't that much out there. And we got a bereavement packet, but for me personally, I flipped through it and didn't see anything that resonated with me or that I felt connected to, or that I felt very alone. I felt I had a friend, so I was lucky, but in terms of external resources, I wasn't confident that there was something out there that was going to be able to help me amidst this journey.
Yeah, so I'm just echoing what Rob said. We both delivered our children in the same hospital. So I do want to double down on the fact that the nurses there and the doctors were phenomenal. In the hospital, the care that they showed and the empathy that they were able to provide was amazing. But I did struggle with resources after the fact. Um, I don't remember, and frankly, I think one of the things, um, I guess Rob, you and I will talk about this question for a little bit until we get
We'll
back.
riff it.
Luckily, we got
We'll
a
riff.
little bit of experience with this.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, so I think one of the things we talk about a lot is we didn't see those resources for dads, and if we did, a lot of it was local groups, right? And local groups are important and they work for a lot of people, and there's nothing bad about them. But we saw an opportunity to kind of connect dads all over the place, because one of the big feedback points we got from local groups was that they tended to be small in nature, 3 to 4 people, and you were, for lack of a better word, you felt a lot of pressure to speak and tell your story right from the beginning. I think one of the things that we've seen, and Rob, maybe you can elaborate on this until Marjorie gets back and can save and can right our ship. But we'll do. Oh, there you are. We were riffing. But
Go ahead.
no, it's perfect. I was just saying. I think one of the things that we found that has made Sad Dads successful in a very safe place is the size of the meetings. And we found that a lot of people come to the meetings and they have no intention to speak whatsoever. They're used to these groups with 3 to 4 people in them, and as I was saying before, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. There's just a lot of pressure to speak, and you're at the forefront. you can disappear into the background in sad dads meetings and listen and engage and just know you're not alone. And what we found is a lot of times people by the end of their first meeting and most of the time their second meeting, they're eager to share because they've realized there's this safe space where they don't have to explain why they're feeling something. They can just be.
Mm.
Um, and Marjorie, I apologize. We probably got a little off topic because we were just trying to fill the airwaves until our
Yes,
leader came back. But
okay, I was gonna bring you back, but go ahead. You can
all right, go
finish your
ahead. Bring us
thought.
back. Bring us
Yeah.
back.
Okay, go. So, we were talking about resources, and I was saying how like 20 years ago there was none, pretty much non-existent. And I think Rob, you were saying something similar. The resources were a little bit lacking, and I don't know, Chris, if you felt the same way. Which usually when there's a gap, we our goal, right? When you're talking about advocacy, is we try to fill it, right? I absolutely believe that's why sad dads is in existence, and we're very thankful for it. um but before we jump into that, I think I want to go back a little bit and just talk about like your experience as a man watching your partner go through something that is so like horrific and unbelievable. Especially because women are the ones who carry, and we experience all the physiological process of being pregnant, having to live all the things that comes with being pregnant, and you're kind of like the sidekick in a sense, in the partner. So what was it like for you? And either of you can jump in, to watch your partner having to experience such a horrific moment, and that was going to last for the rest of your lives.
Excruciating.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, Chris, we talk about this a lot, and the fact that we assume the role of protector and we want to protect our wife and our child, and our wife is protecting the child literally in her body. And then when we see that control just completely slip away from us, we do whatever we possibly can to regain control. And this is something that I'm re-articulating things that we talk about often in Sad Dads Club. And as recently as last week, it came up, just this feeling of a lack of control and trying to
Hmm.
do whatever we could. So going through that experience in that moment, we want to grab control. So the way that we grab control is that we put our grief to the side. We do not deal with what we're feeling. We do not try and process what emotionally we might be going through, because right now our partner is physically in distress and our child has died. So the way that we regain control is we stay steadfast, we ignore our grief, and we do whatever we can to regain a semblance of control by taking care of our wife, by worrying about them, for completely reasonable and understandable reasons. I mean, it's just naturally what we jump towards doing, in an effort, one, to regain control ourselves, two, to protect our wives when we feel like we've already failed as fathers to protect our children.
Got it. Understood.
Yeah. So along the lines of what Rob said, when it first happened to us, we always talk about we're a big proponent of therapy here.
Hmm.
Like a big, big, big proponent of it. It got all three of us, Jay, Rob, and myself, through a lot of really, really challenging times. And one of those roles is protector. So I've been to therapy before. My wife had not. Right. So one of the things that I immediately did that I now realize was a protector mentality was I was solely focused on finding a therapist that I knew my wife, or I hoped my wife would connect with.
Hmm.
I kind of knew I could adapt to the situation, but it was 100% looking for somebody that she could relate to, because I just knew. Um, I saw it in her face, right? Like, this is somebody, my wife is the most remarkable person I know. She is athletic. She's doesn't smoke. She does everything that the playbook would tell you to do in terms of like a healthy pregnancy. And she felt like she failed. She blamed herself.
Hmm.
And it was so unbelievably challenging to watch the person that you love, and she did nothing wrong.
Hmm.
Nothing. And as Rob mentioned, that lack of control, she was also seeking control. She
Mhm,
wanted to know why. She wanted to blame herself because if she could blame herself, there was a reason.
mhm,
Um, and watching her deal with that was excruciating for me.
mhm,
Um, and so I put off, like Rob said, my grief, not because I was actively saying, "Oh, I can't grieve," but because I needed, at least I thought I needed to be there um, for her.
yeah,
And yeah, so those early days, and I don't know if we'll get into it later, but I had my breaking point about a year and a half later over um and if you want me to quickly say it now, so I mean over the silliest reason. So we were fortunate enough to go on to have two living children after um and right after the birth of Annabelle, our dog who had carried us through this. And I know that sounds, well, maybe it doesn't sound strange, but I mean, this dog was our lifeline in the
mhm,
year afterwards, like our comfort dog. Um, it bit somebody right after Annabelle was born, and we were forced to rehome the dog.
mm,
And believe it or not, after all we've been through, that was my breaking point.
mm,
It was like when everything rushed out, and I've talked to Rob about this offline and, you know, many times privately, but I still haven't fully comprehended everything came pouring out in that moment, like everything I had bottled up. Um, but yeah, I mean, watching her delayed that, and it was really hard.
yeah. Well, as a trauma therapist myself, I can understand and appreciate the fact that you really are shopping for a therapist, right? Because it has to be a match. It has to be a good therapeutic alliance. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? So I do understand that fact. Um, and so you were talking about your emotions, and where you got to your breaking point. And one of the things that I kind of want to bring it to is just that how somehow, as men are trying to be the protectors and trying to be like the stable one in a sense, right? That can cause conflict in a relationship because it can come across to your partner, your spouse, or whatever, that you're unfeeling, or you're
Yeah.
just like you're not understanding, and you're not, why aren't you like mad or angry as I am? And so, can you guys share a little bit to that if you've experienced that in your relationship?
Yeah, I absolutely went through that. And there was the experience for both of us that it was almost as though like I had to remind my wife at times that like I'm going through this too.
Mm,
But then whatever prompted that dynamic where it would emerge that I would feel the need to say that was clearly because it didn't seem as though I was going through in the same way or at the same time. The grief journey, even if you're aligned in the exact same loss, is going to be a different road altogether. And it's going to wind and dip in different ways. And that it's interesting because we're talking about that in Sad Dads Club this week is communication with our partners and how
mhm,
unbelievably complicated, intense, and heated it can be just because there's these you build up this dam to try and create stability in your life so that you can go out and continue to put one foot in front of the other, but they're just like cracks and things that fall through because you've gone through something so incredibly traumatic. You're experiencing PTSD. You're triggered left and right by things that both you understand and some things you have no idea why it triggered you.
right.
But I think just with all that pressure, and especially Lila was our firstborn. So we came home to an empty house and everything just felt empty and everything felt quiet. And so with our situation, there was just this nothingness
Mhm,
and the feeling of being on different pages at different times was so challenging, especially in that first year, and the pressure of not being pregnant again when we so badly wanted to expand our family was just omnipresent and
mm,
terrifying and really, really stressful.
mhm,
And I think that all those things contributed to this unbelievably tense communication pattern that at times just didn't work and that felt from my perspective and her perspective on each other that we weren't feeling as much or that we were
right.
not as not as broken by this at certain times, when like now 6.5 years removed, obviously in retrospect, I know that that's not the case. It was just a difference of human nature when experiencing grief and going through the turns and dips and highs and lows at different times.
Right. Because it's not linear. Grief is
Right.
not linear. And so there are peaks and valleys and all of that. So yeah, I can appreciate that. But you see, you want to jump in. Go ahead.
No,
Mhm.
and we can move on too because Rob covered it
No,
really well. But it's,
no.
I mean, I very much believe that grief of this magnitude, I don't actually, I believe people are hardwired a certain way,
Mhm,
right? And I think when you experience grief of this magnitude, whether you want to or not, you revert back to your hardwiring. So, and all I mean by that is, I'm a very extroverted person. My
mhm,
wife is introverted, extroverted, by no means one extreme. But what she needed in those days were very different than what I needed. And
mhm.
learning that was incredibly challenging. Like learning to accept the fact that, what was good for me might not be good for her, and what was good for her might not be good for me, and allowing each other to have that space to get what they needed.
Yeah.
Um, and, we've done a lot of lives and, weekly meetings where we talk about this exact subject. And as Rob mentioned, it is very different. Like the thing that unites us is loss, but the experience and the stories and the day-to-day needs are extremely different between each individual. And we learn that when we do My Child, My Story every other Thursday, where one non-birthing parent shares their story.
Mm,
And you learn something new about someone that you thought you knew.
right.
And you do know, but you learn so much more about them when they get that forum to talk about it. And I think um, that was extreme. It's one of the big things therapy taught us was, you might not always agree with how your spouse or your significant other is grieving, but you have to respect it, and
Right.
you have to work through it if you want to grow together. And Jay, Rob, and I are very lucky that we found great therapists and we figured out how to do that. Um, but it wasn't easy.
Right. Yeah. It's never easy, and something you said, Rob, kind of like triggered a memory for me. Um, and it's that sense of, and I don't know if every woman feels it, but I know for me that I went through a time where I just felt like a sense of like I needed to redeem myself. And so this desire and wanting to have a baby, like right after it
Yeah.
happened, was like so strong. And it was just kind of like, no, 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 no. Like, I have to like prove my womanhood. I should be able to do this. Why wasn't I able to do this? And and then it was the polar opposite. Then I was just like, I don't ever want to have children. I don't want to see
Mhm.
any babies, and it's that like, that yin and yang, that ping ponging was like so like emotional. And I could imagine a lot of women may feel that way. I know that culturally to have a child is a big deal. Like it's, my family's from the Caribbean, and like you're expected to get pregnant on the honeymoon, and so I kind of felt like I let people down, like my family down, my husband down, by not being able to have this live baby. And so, yeah, that sense of like redemption is very depressing. Very like pull you down. I don't know if either. I know you sound like Rob. You sound like your wife went through a little bit of that period. Am I correct
Yeah.
in that
Uh,
estimation?
yeah, actually an extended period because we ended up enduring secondary unexplained infertility. So we had to have after months of like, oh, I think I feel pregnant, like I'm getting the sensation and they're like food tastes like this, and I had these dreams that were similar to when I was pregnant with Lila, and all these signs of things that physically and psychologically I'd never experienced except for when I was pregnant, only to then find out later in the month that she's not pregnant. So going through that and then saying, okay, we have to get some intervention here trying a few different things and then eventually going through IVF. But that just extended a period that felt so stressful and like so much pressure, especially for her. I don't presume to have the first clue of what a woman and their body goes through when it
Right.
comes to carrying a baby, or that everything that your body goes through to then be expecting a live baby and there is no live baby there. And then so I mean, it felt endless. It felt, and we had to have a very real conversation of like, it might just be us,
Right.
which is never how we imagined it. Is that
Right.
going to be okay for us? Because yes, we're kind of going to the last possible option in terms of having my wife carry a baby, which is IVF. Um, are is what if this doesn't work? Because we have to have that conversation. We have to be very like forthright and honest and assume the worst possible outcome, because we've already experienced the worst possible outcome. So statistics and numbers don't mean anything when you've already been on the slim margin of what isn't likely to happen when that does happen to you.
Right.
Numbers and statistics are just not on your side anymore, and you don't rely on them. Um, and so yeah, I remember that being just like the longest, most difficult, emotionally draining and psychologically exhausting and emotionally depleting period of our lives, because we so badly wanted to expand our family and we so
Right.
badly wanted to have a living child at the same time. And this is all in retrospect, because we do now have a healthy, happy, living son who's 4 years old. That gave us a lot of time while
Yeah.
we were hyper focused on being pregnant to grieve Lila. And that
Mhm.
was really important for us. Like, that was important that she did get, even though we wanted to get pregnant again, because we wanted not to replace her, but because we wanted to fulfill the dream of expanding our family.
Yes.
So having that time to really, this sounds weird, but like soak in her emptiness, like soak in her absence,
Yeah. Yeah.
was, I feel like, you never get over it. You live with it, and it doesn't get easier. You just is more manageable, because it's like a muscle that you're working out every day, and you know how to live with it, and how to work it. But we had a lot of time to grieve Lila, over a year before we got pregnant again, which I think, for our journey and for what I've also heard from other people, just in how the complexities of not grieving long enough can come up for us, it was a good thing, because I think we really did need that. But I just feel infinitely lucky that we did get fortunate enough to go on and have a living child after that. But that year plus was brutal. Everybody was getting pregnant. Everybody was welcoming a healthy, happy baby. Everything was triggering us. Everything.
Mhm.
Things
Mhm.
that were obvious and things that made no sense whatsoever, that I still couldn't figure out or tell you why it made me like lose it.
Yeah.
I was just like, my fuse was this long, and I had no patience, and it just felt like everything was closing down on me. And that even though I had this community of a couple other guys I could go to, um, it was hard for
Yeah.
us in that period of time. And I
Yeah.
think I may have strayed way from your original question, so I apologize.
Okay. We'll always bring it back.
We'll always bring it back. Thanks to
Okay.
you.
No, so we were talking about that redemption, that feeling of redemption. And but you were saying that you both had to get comfortable with sitting with the emptiness, and sometimes, we want to be quick and want to hear the noise of a baby, but like, we sometimes we have to sit, and as a therapist, I tell people, you have to sit with the feeling, and it's uncomfortable to sit with feelings that are not good feelings. We don't mind sitting with happiness. We don't mind sitting with excitement, but sadness is not, it doesn't feel good all the time. Sometimes anger, it doesn't feel good, but but we realize that, we can be comfortable with both, right? We can.
Mhm.
So I just, in speaking of that, I want to segue into, okay, so here we are, we've had this loss, there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of, grief and bereavement. And, we've gone to therapy, but we still need a safe space. So tell us about how Sad Dads Club was created. Chris, you're on.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So, we, Sad Dads. Club was really created very naturally. So the introduction was my sister-in-law introduced me to Jay, who introduced me to Rob. And we actually went to a bar in downtown Portland, Maine,
Mhm.
which unfortunately we just found out last night is closing.
No.
Um, I know, but which has since been, dubbed by the community as Beers and Tears,
Mm,
as we had three guys sitting in the middle of a very public bar, and I walked in, and I can't even really put it into words, but it was just extremely emotional, right? You
mm,
had three guys. I there were tears shed, and none of us cared. We did not care what the world thought, and there was just something so freeing. And I'm not saying that would be a normal, like a quote unquote normal reaction if we were to go out and do that every time the three of us hung out,
right.
but there was just something so powerful
Yeah.
about that moment.
Mhm.
Um, and I've mentioned it before, but you could just be. And I know
Mm.
that's not very descriptive, but I could just say what was going through my head, and there were two guys who suddenly got it.
Mhm.
Um, my family was great. This is not a slight on anyone who hasn't been through it, but there's an added level of comfort when you know somebody knows exactly what you're feeling, and that was what those two represented. Um, and from there, we just formed a genuine friendship. Like,
Mhm.
I would call them, and going back to Rob's, and I won't go too far into the details of it, but the complexities of, pregnancy after loss, infertility was not a part of my wife and I's journey.
Mhm.
Um, but, and Rob can attest to this, I still struggled to tell him when we got
Mm,
pregnant again.
Mm.
Um, Despite him him and Jay being my closest companions through this, and a lot of that was because what they were going through.
Mm.
But all of these emotions just made us realize, like, man, if the three of us are feeling like this in this tiny little area of Maine, who else is feeling like this?
Mhm.
So, what the goal has always been, and it's probably doesn't look like it because Rob and I's face is sitting up here, but the only goal is to create a community that is self-sufficient and does not rely on one individual to be at the forefront of it.
Mhm.
We just want a group of guys who can talk about what's going on in their lives, the good, the bad, the ugly. Um, so sitting on my old house's porch one night over probably a couple too many Maine craft IPAs, uh, the conversation about Sad Dads Club started.
Mm.
And over the next, I don't know, Rob, it probably took us a year or so from that first meeting to officially launch.
yeah.
Um, and from there, it continues to take on new life.
Mm.
We have had the one thing I've learned about this community is it is packed full of leaders. It is, we've got individuals who are at the forefront of advocacy, marching alongside what your incredible organization does.
Mhm.
We have individuals who have created a Discord network that fires off 24/7. I can wake up to 200 messages at a time.
Mhm.
Um, Basically, a community that has formed under the pretense of we just want to know life can get better. And
Mhm.
that's really what the three of us wanted to know when we talk to each other, that life can get better.
Mhm.
And that's really what started Sad Dads Club and what continues to drive it to this day.
I love it, and I wish there was a Sad Dads Club here. Are you guys gonna expand maybe to
Oh,
other states?
we are worldwide, and we are not going to stop until we're
Okay,
like
awesome,
we're
awesome.
going to be atmospheric. I mean, we're going to
Right,
be getting
right,
out to the dads and on Mars. But like, I just going off of everything that Chris said, and I think that one of your original questions about what support there was, I think that part of what makes the Sad Dads Club community so strong is the connectivity that everybody has to one another 24/7. That
Mhm.
is where existing support systems and groups fell short, because there is not adequate support. And I mean adequate, like the frequency with which these groups are meeting and the access to one another that they have. When people who are going through this, if they're ready to engage, they need to be able to reach somebody at all times, because it is an all times thing. It is your entire life has been completely broken apart and you're picking together pieces in the dark. Some of them you're never going to find again, but you need to, through all of this time of putting yourself back together, get that validation, get that support, and get that love from people who understand, who have been broken before, who have built themselves back up again, and are also completely different people. Because to a lot of people, the thought that they are going to be forever changed is incredibly scary. And that is something that you're not prepared necessarily or feel ready to do at any point in your life, especially when you just lost what was supposed to be like the happiest part of your life.
Right.
And the fact that there's a Discord channel with over 120 dads, the fact that we're meeting weekly and that people are continually showing up, being vulnerable, being open, making themselves available, saying, hey, text me. I have like some more I want to talk to you about X, Y, or Z. That is what is making the community so strong, is the willingness and the availability and the connectivity just at all times of everybody, which is a total testament to the people who just, all the dads who are in there showing up every single day throughout every single day. It's remarkable. And I am like in awe every single day to read the Discord, to hop on to our Zooms every week. Like, these men are remarkable. And I always say this, but I have to say it anytime anything is being recorded. They are the most generous of heart people I've ever met in my life. And it's just an idea without people showing up and doing the work together. And it's a non-clinical space because none of us are mental health professionals, but
Right.
it's peers, and it's guys becoming brothers, and they start to get to know each other's families, living children. It's remarkable. I'm overwhelmed in the greatest way possible.
That's amazing. And one of your sad dads are members are here. He says, "Sad dads has been the single greatest resource in our journey and led me to the greatest dads you can meet." So,
So there are a
There's
couple
Roan's
dads who are at
dad.
the there's a couple dads at the forefront of the advocacy, but Brad is who I was thinking about when I made that comment. So
oh,
it's good.
okay,
It's good to
okay.
see him here.
So, Chris, you spoke about when you got pregnant again, that it was very it was challenging for you to have to tell Rob that you guys were pregnant again. It took me back a little bit to, about 20 years ago when a good friend of mine, found out she was pregnant and she wanted to tell me, and she asked me to go out with her, but had my then husband come along, but she spoke to him already. I didn't know they spoke to each other, just to break the news to me. And I appreciated like the protectiveness of like making sure that I was going to be okay and that it was fine. And I'm sure you guys had that typical that kind of exchange as well. But I want to dip into and or like move into what it was like for you to be pregnant again after loss. This is pregnancy after loss
Yeah.
month, and we're doing a lot of work and awareness around it. So what was it like for you to do this again after such a heartbreaking previous loss?
So I'm going to start by saying it was probably nothing compared to what my wife was going through.
Hmm.
But with that said, one of the things that we always talk about is after a loss of this nature, the thing you lose with pregnancy is the innocence of pregnancy. You
Hmm.
lose the excitement of pregnancy. So pregnancy goes from this joyous time, um, exciting time, to 9 months. And that's if you're lucky, because if you have infertility issues in between, it's even longer of terror,
Hmm.
right? As Rob said, when you're on the other side of the statistic, you just assume it's going to happen again. So, I've seen some comments in the chat about, well, what is some of the advice of bonding with the baby and everything. So I can tell you now, my journey now, I'm on the third pregnancy after loss journey at the moment.
Oh,
We
wow.
have had two. Oh, thank you. We've had two successful outcomes, and I can definitively tell people out there who are trying to get pregnant and or are pregnant after loss, journey one looks very different than journey three.
Mhm.
Um, journey one was filled with how can I protect my wife?
Mhm.
How can I wanted to be at every appointment. The other thing I'll point out for people who are going through it is your actual medical journey is going to look very different
Mhm.
after a loss of this nature.
Absolutely.
Um, you're going to be in the doctors more. I can say that was comforting to us. We talk a lot in Sad Dads about, speaking up for yourself within the medical community. Um, and, we did that. We were lucky enough to find a provider that was really, really empathetic to
Mm.
what we had gone through. We switched providers, and that's not an insult to the first one. We just did. And this individual, she actually delivered. She delivered Isabel. That's how we met her. So she
Mm.
delivered our stillbirth, and that's how we came across her. Um, and she's been with us ever since. And that journey was she gave me her personal cell phone number. God bless her. I'm sure she changed it as soon as this pregnancy was over. But um, she was. I could text her when we had issues. We would go into the hospital. We would check ourselves in for monitoring. It was really, really, really stressful. And
Mm.
Sarah, my wife, she just kept trying to do everything in her power that she could control, the vitamins, the workouts, the stretching.
Mhm.
And it was really tough because I knew she didn't do anything wrong the first time.
Mm.
Um, so I guess the short answer is it was really stressful. And we're now on the third one. We've had two successful outcomes. Both have had their moments. I don't know if they would have been big moments or not without the loss. Um, but for those who are looking towards the future,
Mhm.
um, just know it gets better. You can start trusting again. You can start um, smiling again, and this pregnancy is not without its hiccups, but it's far less than the first time we went through it.
Right. Can't imagine the roller coaster. It sounds like you had, and you blatantly said it, that you had a provider who was very understanding of the fact that you've experienced a loss and could be a little bit, or maybe a lot of bit, hypersensitive to this pregnancy, and that's a boon, because I think one of the reasons why we at Push partnered up with Mount Sinai to create the Rainbow Clinic is just for that reason.
Mm.
Is that, I know I my pregnancy after loss, like you, changed my provider, because I just felt like I couldn't see that same doctor and not think of the outcome that I had. You know what I mean? And I was lucky enough to have a provider who's just as, gracious and patient as the one that you had. And so those things are important. But, it sounds like what you're saying is like, you do the best you can, but you can't really prepare. It's like it's out of your hands, right? It's really
It's trial by fire.
right, trial by
Mhm.
fire. But it sounds like you're saying that with each subsequent pregnancy that you felt more comfortable in the fact that, okay, we're going to have a greater outcome this time. And I think it's just it's a faith thing, it's a trust thing, and it's almost like I don't have a choice. It's either I'm going to trust this is going to go well, or I'm just going to be anxious the whole, like beyond anxious the whole time.
Well, and I saw a great question earlier in the chat about, well, how did you connect with your baby during pregnancy for future fathers who are
Okay.
look, I don't know how else to say this other than to be honest. The first pregnancy after loss, I really didn't.
Mm,
And one of those defense mechanisms is, well, you know, I'd rather just not be close to the baby if this is going to happen again.
Right.
And, through a lot of therapy, I realized, that didn't do me any good, but
Right.
it's really hard to get out of that mentality when you're living it. So, we didn't set up nurseries. We just
Mhm.
thought, oh, if we prepare for the worst, we won't be as sad if it happens again. And, for those who might be feeling that out there, just know you're heard and it's valid. And it took me a long time to work through those emotions. So this is not me being anything other than on pregnancy three. Like, we now have the crib set up. Like we're
Mhm.
more trusting. It's
Right.
just an evolution, as you said. Like your trust build each time. And bless my wife's heart, so is hers. Like the difference in her this time around is significant. And um, yeah, I'm just very proud of proud's probably a terrible word, but I admire her
Right.
growth. Um,
That's awesome.
but it's a really hard journey.
No, it is a very tough journey. And Rob, I'm interested in your journey as well with your wife, pregnancy after loss.
I think with our fertility struggles,
Mhm.
when we found out we were pregnant, as I'm sure this is same whether or not you have fertility struggles, it was just like the highest high, like elated beyond measure and comprehension. I told myself repeatedly throughout the pregnancy out loud when I was driving to work, when I was driving back from work, when I was driving to appointments. I never missed an appointment. It was like, this is a different pregnancy. This is a different pregnancy. This is a different pregnancy. So I latched on very, very tightly to this hope, to this belief that the dream was going to come true for us, that we were going to have our rainbow baby, that we were going to bring a baby home. And I would out loud say things to myself to try and rewire where psychologically my mind was taking me, which was, of course, the recurring thought of it could happen again. It could happen again. And yes, it could. But I had to hold on to this optimism. And we had a incredibly difficult pregnancy. There were 3 separate hospitalizations and scares. But I told myself and I latched on so hard to the fact that that baby was going to come home. And because we went through IVF, we had a successful egg retrieval and we had 8 viable embryos. So we had the luxury of deciding a boy or girl. We chose a boy just to try and make it as different a pregnancy as we could in
Mhm.
every way. And in that way, we had control where most people just don't.
Yeah.
And the thing that I do remember scaring me the most was that I wasn't going to be capable of loving this child as much as I loved Lila. That
Mm.
I that there was it was such a grand love that I had for Lila and have for her that I didn't know how it was possible. And that was what scared me the most because I was so attached to this baby's going to come home. This baby's going to be alive. Of course, there were recurring thoughts and I would get scared and I would doubt, but I would always just like force myself by saying things out loud, by repeating certain lines that would just say, like, no, like this baby's coming home. This is a different pregnancy. This is a different pregnancy. I've talked about this quite a bit with certain members of the Sad Dads Club, just about that fear of like not being able to love your rainbow baby or your next living child as much as you love the child that passed. And what we found and what I experienced very directly and completely is that they all have their own unique love. There is no love borrowed from Lila that goes to
Mhm.
Dallas, my living son. There is no love taken from either of them. They each occupy a spot in my heart that is for them and for them alone. Like nobody else can touch it. Nobody else has access to it. It is just their love. And that was leading up to Dallas being born and us bringing him home. That was my biggest fear because I didn't in my head or heart understand how I could possibly love someone as much as I loved Lila. And that was the scariest part of the subsequent pregnancy for me.
Mm. That's amazing because it's interesting because I hear of parents of who've had live children back to back, and that same fear is expressed. When people think about having a second child, they're like, how can I possibly love the second child as much as I love the first child? But I
Yeah.
think it's so poignant to hear that even in loss, that's a fear as well. Like even in loss, that you could feel like, okay, I love this first baby, even though it's they're not here. I
Mhm.
love them so much. Could I possibly transfer or expand myself to, like, accept this rainbow baby as much as I did for the first one. So I appreciate that. And Catherine's mama appreciates that too, because she said, "Thank you for talking about this, Rob. My husband and I are going through IVF again after the death of our daughter, and it is hard to press on." So you're definitely giving some people some encouragement. That's for you, Catherine's mama.
Definitely feel you.
Yes. So so many questions, but I know we're gonna rein it in. We're gonna pull it together. Um, so as I was preparing to do this interview, I saw one of the new segments that's on your website, and I love the fact that they did a segment on they filmed the day that you guys were talking about sex, how sex
Ah,
changes after loss, which I was like,
yeah.
yes, this is a great conversation, because it's not talked about. Not that we're going to talk about it now, but but I so appreciated that, because I'm like, no one talks about this stuff, and it's
Yeah.
real. So with Sad Dad's Club, like, what can people expect when they come, when they click on that Zoom link and say, okay, I'm here? Like, what can they expect when they join you?
Love, support, welcoming, and respect,
Mhm,
validation, and a place that they can be entirely however they need to be. Of
mhm,
course, we have an expectation of respect, and that has never been an issue. But I truly think there is no place I've ever experienced like it. You are never going to find a group of 30 to 50 men getting together somewhere, and non-birthing parents who, without some sort of toxic BS or any sort of domineering attitude or personality, like, it really is this incredibly respectful, warm, and loving place. What do you think, Chris?
I think it's a place you can come to start rebuilding um, slowly the foundations of what you once remembered life being.
mhm,
So that's a very convoluted way of saying uh, return to a little bit of normalcy. And normalcy is going to look very different. But, I think one of the things that stands out to me is one of the members said very early on. They came to the meeting because they wanted to see a future version of themselves.
hmm. That's
They
powerful.
wanted to understand that, this darkness would subside. And when I say what Rob, I don't want to just reiterate what Rob said, because he's right. You're going to find a room full of people who understand. You're going to find a room full of people who come from a wide variety of different backgrounds, all united by one thing, and it's the grief of a loss of a child.
Mhm,
Um, we haven't talked too much about like the Discord tonight, nor will we, but when we talk about sad dads and what you'd expect, we've formed this community, but it's not just a community based on grief. We're
mhm,
going to address grief. We're going to talk about all the stuff that comes alongside grief. This week we're talking about how do you speak to your partner. As you mentioned, we talked about sex after loss. One of the big topics is holidays. We talk about it all the time.
yeah,
Um, but you're also going to hear that, we filled 3 fantasy football leagues this year. We had a Dungeons and Dragon games that meets every week. We did, I wasn't on this one, unfortunately, but we went down to BU for a hockey game, did a retreat in Maine where 20 guys flew in from all over the country and internationally. The second one's coming up. Um, in short, you're going to find a family.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and however you need that to look, you're probably going to find somebody in a similar situation. That's what we've found. We haven't found anyone who at least doesn't feel a little bit less alone. So all we do is exist. Um, and you make you take what you need from the community, and that's the entire purpose. Just, after a loss like this, it starts, the grief process is second by second, and then hopefully it gets to minute by minute, and then hour by hour, and then day by day. And
Mhm.
then what I say is it never, at least for me, has never really progressed past that. I think about Isabel every day. but it took a long time to go from second to second to day by day. And Sad Dads has been a huge part of that journey for me, and I think hopefully a lot of other people, and hopefully whoever unfortunately has to join us in the future.
Yes, we're so thankful for that you guys created such a platform for men. Do women get to join? Is there is time and a space where the ladies come in and like
So
make their presence known?
we recently had to put in some guidelines due to having a community forum where it was clear that dads felt most comfortable with dads and not birthing parents, especially when talking about things like intimacy after loss. So while right now our space is designed for and intended for dads and non-birthing parents, I was just thinking about today, because we're constantly thinking about ways to expand programming, having like an SDC family night so that we can have an opportunity for mothers to join us and for couples to come together, because that for some could be really helpful. And so while there isn't currently anything, we are certainly always finding ways to try and expand and improve and provide something for everyone, because it isn't just dads who I think we know could benefit from this model of a community. And so I think that more soon, but right now we do have guidelines in place due to comfort levels and what people were willing to share in the space in which they're most comfortable.
Well, and as Rob said, we are working on. I think the idea of a family night is good, but it's also um, what we found is there's a number of wives through Sad Dads who have connected because of the friendships that the individuals within Sad Dads have made. So, we get approached all the time, and that's why we're constantly, one of the organizations that's been, extremely pivotal to what we've launched is called Sales. You
Mhm.
know, and they recently launched Mom's Open Hour,
Mm,
which is they were gracious enough to allow us to use their Zoom platform before we you know could afford to even buy a Zoom platform.
Mhm.
And they've since launched that, and what we've seen is there is definitely a need out there for moms to have this space, and that's why we are not only very open but also actively discussing things like couples night and family night. So yeah, everything Rob said, but if anyone is feeling anything, never hesitate to reach out. We have connections that can help
No
hopefully
doubt.
anyone for any situation.
yes. So that being said, how can people find you?
www.saddadsclub.com is our website. We always have our registration forms up there for our various Zoom offerings, along with in-person engagement opportunities, which I should also mention, going back to Space for Moms, we did just have a hike last weekend in Maine, and that was open to living children, to spouses, partners, whomever. So we really are doing what we can when we can to include as many members of the family as possible. But saddadsclub.com, at sad.dads.club on Instagram. We also are, that's the platform on which I'd say we're most active. And that's where you're going to find the most stuff between our website and our Instagram. That's our digital presence. And as Chris mentioned, the Discord we have, we just ask that we always include the link to our Discord if somebody in our weekly Zoom chat. So if someone comes to one of those weekly Zooms, they'll get access to our Discord channel. That link changes every 7 days for security purposes. So it wouldn't do us any good to just throw it out there.
Right. And how often do you all meet? Is it like once a
Five
If
week?
5 times a month right now
Oh,
on
okay.
Zoom, and then virtually 5 times a month, like formally. But then we also are doing in-person engagement things, trying to do at least one a month.
That's awesome. I think what I love about the Zoom aspects is that it can be, like you said, and I think in being international, right? It can be nationwide, international, and it can be anywhere and join. And I think I don't hear of many spaces for dads, so I think that's wonderful that you guys have that. And I appreciate it. But guys, Thank you so much, Rob and Chris, for joining us tonight,
Thank you.
letting us know about sad dads. I wasn't privy to it too until my partner Liz, was sharing. We had pushed. We appreciate you all and what you do.
Thank you.
It is so needed. We're so thankful. We'll be sending dad your way. We hope not.
Please.
We don't want to, but if we have to, we will send them your way. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your heart, and your organization. So, thank you both so very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you for
much.
having us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My partner, Anna's in the back, so I don't know if she's gonna like what,
And she-
what hocus pocus she's gonna do.
What do we do now?
And I write the Instagram post. Somebody asks, so it's my time to shine to say that it's my handwriting. It's me. I'm the one who uses a Sharpie. And
Yeah, it's very true. Just
Got it.
Sharpie on a postcard.
Sharpie on a card.
We'd love to. I'm sure we'd love to have you guys again.
We'd love to come back.
Yes, you guys are awesome. So we're thankful for that. Since we're just waiting around, push